5 times in the last 2,000 years, civilization has not reformed its debt.
No.
It hasn't just tightened its belt or slowly negotiated lower payments or, paid down the principal through decades of austerity.
No, nothing like that. Instead, it has completely and often violently reset the entire system.
And we are currently, right now, in 2025, smack in the middle of that exact same pattern, repeating for the 6th time.
That repeating cycle, that rhythmic pulse of massive debt accumulation, followed by systemic debt annihilation, is really the undeniable heartbeat of financial history.
It's a heartbeat.
It is, and to those who study the long view, it's as reliable as the tides. We are looking at a repeating mechanical sequence that dictates the largest wealth transfers in human history.
And the difference between being on the right side or the wrong side of that transfer, it's everything.
It's everything. It really comes down to recognizing this pattern.
Yeah.
If you are currently holding the wrong assets, the assets history proves will be destroyed, you are positioned to be a victim of this coming cycle.
So we have been deep in the historical transcripts, the central bank data, all of the economic research. And our mission for you today is, well, it's simple. We're going to walk through the complete blueprint for what happens next.
Right. We're going to cover 2 core issues extracted from all this material. First, the precise 6-stage sequence, the historical progression that always leads to this inevitable financial reset.
And second, the simple 3-position investment strategy, what we're calling the ultimate hedge, that has survived every major crisis since the Great Depression of 1929.
A strategy that insulates portfolios against deflation, hyperinflation, and banking collapse. The goal here is to move you from being a passive observer, potentially a victim of this pattern, to being an informed participant.
Someone strategically positioned for what could be the greatest wealth transfer of our generation. Okay, so let's get into it. Part 1, the historic uncertainty of debt annihilation.
Before we map the historical stages, we have to address why a reset is not a political choice. This isn't something we can, vote our way out of. It's a mathematical necessity.
A mathematical necessity?
Yes. We have to start with the raw, undeniable numbers defining our current reality in 2025.
And when you look at the figures, the situation immediately shifts from being like complex economics to just simple, tragic arithmetic.
Exactly.
We're talking about $300 trillion in global debt.
$300 trillion.
To put that in context for everyone, the world's total economic output, that's global gross domestic product, or GDP, is roughly $90 trillion a year.
So do the math. The global debt is equivalent to 335% of global GDP. The entire planet owes 3 1/3 times what it produces in an entire year.
Wow.
And while that global figure is staggering, if you narrow it down to the largest economy, the United States, the scale of the crisis, it's just as overwhelming.
So what are we looking at domestically?
The U.S. federal debt alone is sitting at $36 trillion.
Yeah.
And that has just ballooned, absolutely exploded post-2008 and especially post-2020.
And crucially, that $36 trillion number, that doesn't even tell the whole story, does it?
Not even close. That number doesn't account for the unfunded liabilities, the mandatory future obligations for programs like Social Security and Medicare.
Which are?
Those easily push the total fiscal hole well past the $100 trillion mark.
And we can't forget the consumer, the person on the street. This isn't just a government problem.
No, it's completely systemic. Across the U.S., you have individuals weighed down by $1.7 trillion in student loans.
A huge political topic right now.
A massive one. Then you have $1.6 trillion in auto loans and another $1.2 trillion in credit card debt. This crushing weight of obligation, it spans governments, corporations, and households. It's everywhere.
So this is where the simple math comes in, the part that you say locks the system into an impossible trajectory.
This is it. Let's analyze the capacity of the global economy, that $90 trillion machine, to actually service this debt. Even if we assume a generous global GDP growth rate of, say, 3% per year.
Which is pretty optimistic for developed nations.
Very optimistic. But let's use it. That means we generate about $2.7 trillion in new real value each year. That's the new capital available to service the debt.
Okay, so that's the income side of the ledger. $2.7 trillion in new money.
Correct. But now look at the expense side. We have $300 trillion in outstanding debt. If the average interest rate on that colossal debt is just 3%.
Which feels extremely low, especially with recent rate hikes.
It's a very conservative estimate. But even at just 3%, that $300 trillion demands $9 trillion in annual interest payments.
Okay, wait, let me just repeat that to make sure it sinks in for me and for everyone listening. The global economy, best case scenario, produces $2.7 trillion in new value,
Yes.
but the existing debt demands $9 trillion just in interest payments.
That's right.
So we have a $6.3 trillion annual deficit just to service the interest, let alone ever pay down the principal.
Exactly. That is the moment. That's the moment the system transitions from being inefficient or, poorly managed to being mathematically impossible.
It's a Ponzi scheme.
The sources correctly identify it as a Ponzi scheme. We are borrowing new money not to fund productive growth or new factories, but simply to pay the interest on the old debt. When the debt demands 3 times more in payments than the economy can generate in new production, the system cannot be sustained.
It's guaranteed to fail.
It is guaranteed to fail. The debt must, by definition, be eliminated through a reset.
So if the math says that the $300 trillion debt can't be repaid, then what? History provides a pretty ruthless set of rules for how it gets eliminated, right?
It does. And the sources show there's no fourth option. There's no easy way out.
People always ask, can't we just, endure decades of high taxes and stagnation, just grind it out?
And historically, the answer is always no. The social and political structure breaks long before that level of fiscal discipline can ever be enforced. When the debt has to disappear, there are only 3 proven historical methods.
Method 1, hyperinflation.
This is the government's subtle default.
Yeah.
They just turn on the printing presses, or the digital equivalent, and create unlimited money.
So they don't technically default on the debt. They just pay that $36 trillion with currency that's been rendered worthless.
Precisely. The debt is paid with paper that buys nothing. Debtors win, the government debt evaporates in real terms, but savers, bondholders, creditors, the entire middle class relying on fixed incomes or pension funds, they get financially wiped out.
Their money is just destroyed.
Gone.
Okay, what's method 2?
Method 2 is jubilee. This is the more direct approach, a complete or partial cancellation of debts mandated by the government.
We're seeing little hints of this already, aren't we? Like the student loan forgiveness programs?
Those are perfect micro examples.
Yeah.
Now imagine if that expanded to major corporate loans, to mortgages, to sovereign debt. The financial system as we know it would require complete nationalization and rebuilding.
Creditors take a direct, massive loss.
And wealth is forcibly transferred back to the debtors.
And method 3 is the darkest one.
It is. War. Massive destruction of physical capital and loss of life creates a total breakdown of order. Debts simply become unenforceable. They become irrelevant amid the chaos of physical destruction.
World War II is the big example.
It didn't just end the Axis powers, it functionally reset Europe's entire sovereign and corporate debt structure. It literally cleared the slate, paving the way for the post-war recovery.
So the lesson is, when the math says the debt can't be paid, reality enforces that math one way or another.
Absolutely. The debt disappears either through the destruction of the currency, which is hyperinflation,
The destruction of the financial system, which is jubilee.
or physical destruction, which is war. The pattern always results in a massive wealth transfer from the current holders of paper assets to the holders of hard assets and fixed-rate debt.
Okay, now that we understand why the debt has to be eliminated and how it happens, let's map out that 6-stage sequence. This is the historical blueprint that led to every single one of these events.
And the sources are clear this pattern is repeating today with what they call the precision of a metronome.
So let's start at the beginning. Stage 1.
Stage 1. Credit expansion creates the illusion of prosperity. This is the initial phase where the cycle feels fantastic. Credit is easy, interest rates are low, people are borrowing aggressively, and the economy appears to be booming.
Leaders point to rising asset prices, high employment, and say, look how well we're doing.
Exactly. The classic example is ancient Rome between roughly 10 and 30 AD. After a period of stability, Roman credit markets just exploded.
What were they borrowing for?
Massive public works, aqueducts, roads, monuments. But critically, the elite also borrowed heavily to fund lavish consumption. Gladiatorial games, elaborate feasts, all that competitive wealth display. The economy looked productive, but so much of that borrowing was funding what we'd call bread and circuses, not productive capital.
They were borrowing from the future to enjoy today.
Precisely. And we saw this replicated in the modern era between 1980 and 2008, a period often called the Great Moderation.
Right. It felt like we'd solved the business cycle.
It did. But massive deregulation and financial innovation just led to an explosion of debt. Think of subprime mortgages, the explosion of student loans, massive corporate leverage. It felt like permanent prosperity, but it was just leverage.
So that sets the stage for stage 2.
Stage 2. Debt reaches 250% plus of GDP. This is the point of no return. Once debt crosses this line, growth starts to slow down dramatically because more and more of the economy's resources are being diverted just to service the existing debt instead of being invested in productivity or innovation.
And there's a historical parallel for this too.
Oh yes. Look at medieval Europe in the 1340s. Kings, like Edward III of England, were constantly at war and owed Italian banks, like the famous Bardi and Peruzzi families, more than their entire kingdom's annual revenue.
The banks were financing the wars.
They were. And they became exposed to default risk that was 10 times greater than their capital reserves. So when Edward III finally defaulted in 1345, the credit markets just froze instantly. The whole system seized up.
And in our time, when did we cross that line?
The 2008 financial crisis pushed global debt past 250% of GDP. But instead of deleveraging, central banks and governments flooded the system with cheap money, which just encouraged more borrowing.
So by 2020, even before COVID, we were already at what?
Over 320% of GDP.
Okay.
The massive COVID stimulus pushes it quickly toward 350%. We are deeply, deeply embedded in stage 2.
Which leads directly to the mathematical trap.
Stage 3. Interest payments consume all real growth. This is what we talked about earlier. It's the moment the interest on the debt demands more capital than the economy can generate. And we are here right now.
The classic example of this is revolutionary France.
Devastating. In 1788, under King Louis XVI, the government was spending an astonishing 60% of its entire revenue purely on interest payments.
60%.
They were borrowing new money just to pay the interest on the old loans. It was a national Ponzi scheme. And when the king tried to force the wealthy nobility to pay new taxes to cover that interest tab,
they refused, and that refusal triggered the revolution.
It led directly to it. And today, in our modern era, we see the same trap closing. The U.S. is currently spending around $900 billion a year on interest payments.
And that's climbing fast. It's on its way to $1 trillion a year.
It is. For context, that is more than the entire defense budget. Meanwhile, U.S. GDP might grow by maybe $500 to $700 billion a year in real terms. Our interest payments are now consuming over 100% of our net new economic growth.
So every new dollar of real output just goes straight out the door to service old debt.
We are firmly, firmly trapped in stage 3.
That structural trap then pushes us into stage 4. System becomes unpayable mathematically. Recognition. This is the psychological breaking point.
Yes, this one, everyone from the average person to the most sophisticated investor recognizes that the debt will never be repaid because the numbers just don't work anymore.
The prime example here is Weimar Germany in 1923.
Absolutely. Their debt from war reparations and domestic borrowing exceeded 400% of GDP. They were printing trillions of marks daily, but the critical debt was denominated in gold. It was mathematically impossible. And crucially, the recognition was universal. Everyone knew it was hopeless.
That recognition is what made the coming hyperinflation inevitable.
It did. And in our modern era, that recognition is spreading. It's moving from the fringes to mainstream finance. The analysis is brutal. To pay off the $36 trillion U.S. federal debt, you need to run trillion-dollar surpluses for 36 straight years.
Which would require either, a 50% tax hike on everyone or cutting 70% of all government spending.
Both are completely politically impossible. The mathematical reality is colliding with political reality. We are in stage 4.
And this recognition fuels stage 5, political pressure for reset builds.
Exactly. Once the debt is known to be unpayable, the political system fractures. Debtors, suffering under crushing payments, demand relief. Creditors, holding the failing paper assets, demand austerity and protection.
The social contract breaks down.
It turns into open conflict. Let's go back to ancient Rome, 33 AD. Debtor prisons were overflowing. The common people, the plebeians, were demanding a debt jubilee. But the wealthy patricians, who were the creditors, refused because canceling the debt would wipe out their fortunes.
And that deadlock led to
violent riots, mobs attacking the homes of creditors. It was a classic debtor versus creditor conflict. Same thing in revolutionary France in 1789. The Third Estate, the debtors, demanded default on the debts owed to the aristocracy. The aristocracy, the creditors, demanded more taxes. The revolution itself was the violent resolution of that conflict.
And today, we see this pressure everywhere.
Everywhere. Strong movements for student loan forgiveness, that's a partial jubilee. Advocates of modern monetary theory, or MMT, who are essentially arguing for a controlled devaluation of the currency.
Yeah.
On the other side, you have gold bugs, crypto advocates saying fiat is doomed.
Both political parties are just responding with massive transfer payments, stimulus checks.
Which is just indirect debt relief. The pressure is overwhelming, and stage 5 is building very, very rapidly.
Which brings us to the inevitable conclusion. Stage 6. Reset via hyperinflation, jubilee, or war.
The debt is eliminated. The method varies, but the result is always the same. A massive wealth transfer, the destruction of existing savings, and an economic rebuild from a cleaner slate.
Historically, Weimar Germany and revolutionary France used hyperinflation, wiped out all domestic debt.
But critically, it destroyed the middle class, which held their wealth in savings and fixed income assets.
But there's also the negotiated path, the jubilee.
Yes, the most successful modern example is the post-war European settlement. The 1953 London Debt Agreement saw the Allies cancel 50% of West Germany's debts. They had learned the lesson from Weimar. A crushing debt load just leads to extremism, so they chose method 2 to allow for a stable reconstruction.
So what's the prediction for us, for the US and the global economy today?
The sources suggest the most likely path isn't a Weimar-style hyperinflation overnight. It's more likely to be high, persistent inflation, a controlled version of method 1 combined with selective jubilees, which is method 2.
So we're talking, what, 10 to 20% annual inflation for a decade or two?
Something like that. It's the government's preferred subtle default. They maintain the fiction that the debt is being repaid, but they pay it back with dollars that are worth significantly less. Debtors with fixed-rate loans win. Hard asset owners win.
And savers and creditors.
They lose their shirts. So the core question for you, the listener, is this. As we sit here, firmly between stage 3 and stage 4, heading for an inevitable stage 6, are you holding the assets that history proves are destroyed? Or are you holding the assets that absorb that wealth transfer?
That's a huge question, and it leads us directly to the solution. If this financial cycle is inevitable, how do you position yourself not just to survive, but to capitalize on that wealth transfer?
The secret really lies in simplicity. We tend to overcomplicate finance, worrying about hundreds of variables, but the economy only ever exists in 3 fundamental states. It's like water. It can only be liquid, ice, or steam.
And if you bet everything on one state, say you bet everything on growth,
you will inevitably be destroyed when the economy transitions into one of the other 2 states.
Okay, so let's break down those 3 states. The first one is deflation, the winter.
This is the credit contraction phase.
Yeah.
Banks stop lending, liquidity just evaporates, and asset prices fall off a cliff. Think 1929 or the absolute bottom of the 2008 crisis.
And the biggest danger here is insolvency. You just run out of money.
Exactly. In this state, cash is king because it allows you to survive the crash and, more importantly, exploit opportunities when assets are being sold for cheap.
Okay, state number 2, inflation the fire.
This is often the government's panicked response to deflation. They turn on the printing presses, the digital ones, to try and stimulate the system. In this state, holding paper money is financial suicide. Your purchasing power is just destroyed day by day.
Like we saw in the 1970s stagflation.
The perfect example. You need hard assets, things that can't be printed by a bureaucrat or devalued by a central bank.
And the third state, growth, the summer.
This is the recovery and expansion phase. This is when genuine human ingenuity, technological innovation, and productive earnings drive the market higher. Here, you need to own equity, a piece of the productive economy.
So the flaw in the matrix, as you put it, is trying to guess which state comes next.
It is.
Yeah.
The secret, the all-weather approach, isn't trying to guess the economic weather. It's building a portfolio that survives all 3 states simultaneously. And history proves this requires 3 simple, critical positions.
All right, let's talk about those positions. Position number 1 is the fortress, cash and optionality. This is cash and short-term U.S. Treasury bills, or T-bills.
Right.
Now, a lot of people are probably thinking, wait a minute, if high inflation is coming, why would I want to hold cash? It's going to lose value.
And that is a critical question. The key is that this position is not an investment for maximizing return. It's an investment for optionality and liquidity.
Optionality. Let's define that in practical terms for an investor facing a crisis.
Optionality means having the capacity to act when literally no one else can. When the market crashes by 50% in a deflationary shock, and remember, those deflationary crashes always arrive faster and deeper than inflation does. The person who invested every last dollar is forced to sell their assets at the absolute bottom.
Just to cover margin calls or living expenses, they lock in their losses.
They do. But the person holding the fortress have the cash, the liquidity, to step in and buy those same assets at massive discounts. That is optionality.
The Great Depression is the ultimate proof of this. The stock market collapsed 89%, but the purchasing power of the dollar soared.
It soared. If you held cash, you didn't just survive, you gained massive buying power. The investor Bernard Baruch famously held huge cash reserves. By 1932, a dollar could buy 3 times as much food, land, or corporate equity as it could in 1929. He used that cash position, one, to buy entire corporations for pennies on the dollar.
And a more recent example, 2008, Warren Buffett.
The master of this strategy. When global liquidity vanished, Buffett stepped in with his massive cash reserves. He put billions into Goldman Sachs and General Electric when they were, as he said, on their knees. He secured massive preferential deals that paid him for years to come.
So let's talk about the specific asset here, T-bills. For anyone who's not in finance, what exactly is a T-bill and why is it considered so safe?
A T-bill is just short-term U.S. government debt, usually maturing in a year or less. They're considered the safest, most liquid asset in the world because they're backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government.
And why hold those instead of just cash in a bank?
Because T-bills currently pay interest. Right now, they're hovering around 4% to 5%, risk-free. So you are literally being paid to wait for the crisis. You maintain your fortress of safety and liquidity, but you offset some of the inflation.
And the signal from the market's biggest players today is deafening on this.
It is. Warren Buffett is aggressively holding over $325 billion in short-term treasuries and cash. It's the largest defensive fortress in his company's history. He is clearly positioning himself to deploy that immense optionality when the crash comes.
Okay, so that's the fortress. Let's move to position 2, the insurance, the unprintable asset. And this is physical gold.
Yes. This is your essential shield against the second threat, inflation, the fire. And we should be specific here. We are talking about gold bullion or physically backed ETFs, not volatile gold mining stocks.
Why not mining stocks?
Because they're fundamentally equities, not insurance. They have operational risk, management risk. They're part of the engine, not the insurance.
Okay, so why gold? We live in an age of Bitcoin, of complex derivatives. Why does this shiny yellow metal still hold the title of ultimate insurance?
Because its role is profoundly simple. It is the only financial asset that is not someone else's liability.
Say more about that. That's a really key point.
If you own cash in a bank, you trust the bank not to fail. If you own a bond, you trust a government will repay you. If you own a stock, you trust a CEO and a board of directors. When you own a bar of physical gold, you are trusting physics and history. It cannot be printed, it cannot be erased in a digital default, it can't be devalued by a central planner. It is the ultimate insurance policy against government failure.
Which is exactly what happens in stage 6 of the debt cycle.
Exactly. And history proves this. Think about 1934. President Roosevelt, desperate to fight deflation, used an executive order to devalue the dollar against gold. He raised the official price overnight from $20 an ounce to $35.
That's an instant 69% gain for anyone holding gold.
An instant 69% gain while the rest of the country was suffering through bank failures. Gold protected its holders.
And the 1970s are an even more powerful example.
Oh, absolutely. After the U.S. left the gold standard entirely, inflation just took off. Gold started that decade at $35 an ounce and soared to $850 an ounce by 1980. That's a 24 times return.
A 24x return. A small allocation to gold would have covered all the losses you had anywhere else in your portfolio.
It absolutely proves its role as the ultimate hedge against monetary failure. And this isn't just theory. The sources highlight that central banks globally, we're talking China, Russia, India, Turkey, are buying physical gold at a record pace right now.
Why?
They're diversifying their reserves away from the U.S. dollar. They are preparing for the inevitable devaluation, or worse, the weaponization of paper money. They see the debt cycle nearing its end, and they are aggressively loading up on position 2 to protect their national wealth.
Okay, fortress for deflation, insurance for inflation. That brings us to position 3, the engine, the growth compounder.
And this is the S&P 500 index, or similar total market index funds. This is the position designed to capture that third state, growth the summer.
This position is basically a bet on human ingenuity, right? On innovation. Whether it's AI or biotechnology or just finding more efficient ways to do things, that process doesn't stop even if the economy hits a crisis.
It doesn't. And this is the position that requires the most discipline and patience, but it's the one that delivers the greatest long-term results through the power of compounding. We often look at market crashes as permanent, but history shows they are just temporary dips in a long-term upward trajectory.
So let's take the most painful historical scenario imaginable. An investor who bought at the absolute peak of the market in 1929, right before the Great Depression. The market falls 89%. What happened to them?
If they were disciplined and never sold, they recouped all their losses by 1945. They doubled their money by the 1950s and quintupled it by the 1960s. The engine eventually drives you out of the abyss, but only if you hold on through the volatility.
Same thing after 2008, a 57% drop in the S&P 500.
And the subsequent recovery, fueled by technology and innovation, turned every dollar invested at the bottom into $6 by 2021.
So the key realization here, the synergy between the three positions, is that volatility is just the price of admission for this immense long-term growth.
That's it, exactly. The fortress, position 1, and the insurance, position 2, they aren't designed to generate high returns. They exist to ensure you are never forced to sell the engine, position 3, at the absolute worst time because of panic or necessity.
You hold all three, and your portfolio becomes crisis-proof, protected against deflation, hyperinflation, and stagnation. Okay, so this brings us to the practical application. How do we put this all together? Actionable steps for someone listening right now in 2025.
Right. Understand the historical pattern is useless without action. The blueprint tells us exactly who loses and who wins when the debt is erased. We know the most likely path is high, persistent inflation.
In that scenario, savers and creditors are destroyed, their fixed incomes, their savings, the purchasing power just collapses.
While debtors and hard asset owners win, the real value of their debt shrinks, and their hard assets maintain their utility across any currency reset.
So, step 1, minimize non-interest-bearing cash holdings. Simple cash in a bank account will be systematically destroyed by that 10% to 20% annual inflation.
Absolutely. Move that liquidity into interest-bearing T-bills, which is position 1, or physical gold, position 2.
Okay, step 2. And this one feels very counterintuitive. You're saying, consider strategically taking on fixed-rate debt.
It feels wrong, but it's historically correct. A 30-year mortgage at a fixed rate, for instance, becomes a gift if inflation runs high for the next decade. You are borrowing money today, but you are repaying it over 30 years with dollars that will be worth significantly less.
The people who had mortgages in the 1970s saw the real value of their debt just inflate away, while their property values, a hard asset, soared.
The math is profound. If you have a $300,000 mortgage and inflation runs at 15% for 5 years, your income is likely to rise considerably with that inflation, but your $2,000 monthly payment stays fixed. That payment becomes a much smaller percentage of your real income. You are winning.
And step 3 is to transfer wealth into other hard assets.
Yes, assets that maintain productive businesses and agricultural land. The key concept is utility. A house provides shelter, whether it's priced in dollars or bolivars. Its value is its physical utility, not its paper denomination.
So let's drill down on one of those hard assets you mentioned, farmland. It's often overlooked, but the sources we looked at highlighted it as a near-perfect inflation hedge.
It really is. Farmland is an essential hard asset because it produces essential goods food, and obviously you can't manufacture more of it. This ties into what's known as the Ricardian theory of rent.
Okay, break that down for us.
Simply put, David Ricardo argued that land is inherently valuable because it provides a fixed supply of productive capacity. This ensures it remains one of the greatest stores of real value during periods of inflation and monetary instability. The theory holds up.
And the modern data backs this up.
The empirical evidence is compelling. Data from the TIA Center for Farmland Research, spanning 5 decades from 1970 to 2019, shows that farmland returns are positively correlated with inflation.
How correlated?
The correlation with the Consumer Price Index, the CPI, is around 65% over the long term. So when paper money is losing value to inflation, farmland tends to appreciate, shielding your wealth.
And crucially, how does it correlate with the stock market?
That's the key diversification aspect. It has a low or even negative correlation with equities. The data shows a correlation with the S&P 500 of negative 24.7%.
So it zigs when the stock market zags.
Exactly. When you combine your engine, which is position 3, with hard assets like farmland, you get true portfolio balance.
What about resilience? Does it crash like stocks do?
Rarely. Farmland displayed positive total returns in nearly every single year of that 50-year period examined. There were only 2 minor negative total returns during the 1980s farm crisis and 1 in 2009. That stability is key for investors focused on preservation.
And it generates income, right?
Yes. While the long-term appreciation drives most of the returns, the annual rental income from farmers provides a smooth, reliable income stream. You get paid to wait for the asset to appreciate.
And how does professionally managed farmland perform?
The NCREF data, that's the National Council of Real Estate Investment Fiduciaries, shows that professionally managed farmland consistently outperforms the general market data. It averaged an 11.2% return versus 8.8% for the general market from 1991 to 2019. This is why sophisticated endowments and pension funds are quietly accumulating these assets. They're preparing for the inflationary reset.
Okay, so let's tie this all together into a practical allocation model. How do you translate this three-position strategy into a portfolio for your own life?
The key is that this isn't about timing the market, which is impossible. It's about disciplined allocation based on your time horizon, on your age.
Let's start with a young person, someone under 40.
For the young learner, your biggest asset is time. That means you can afford to embrace volatility to maximize growth. Your primary goal is asset accumulation. So your allocation should lean heavily into the engine.
But you still need the fortress and the insurance.
You must. A disciplined allocation would look something like this. 20% fortress in cash, or T-bills. That's your dry powder to survive a job loss or a 50% market drop without ever having to sell your engine. Then 10% insurance in gold or other hard assets as your hedge against the reset. And finally, 70% engine in an S&P 500 index to maximize your exposure to long-term growth.
Okay, now what about someone middle-aged, say 40 to 60?
For the middle-aged learner, you have significant capital already and you have more to lose, so you need a more balanced approach. Preservation becomes a higher priority, but you still need growth.
So you dial up the fortress.
Exactly. We'd suggest something like 30% fortress. This gives you more liquidity and a greater capacity to buy when there's a major dislocation. Keep the 10% insurance as your consistent currency hedge. And then 60% engine, still strong growth, but slightly reduced equity risk to dampen the volatility.
And finally, someone approaching or in retirement, 60 plus.
For the approaching retirement learner, preservation is the absolute priority. You simply cannot afford a 50% drawdown because your time horizon for recovery is too short.
So the focus here shifts to maximum liquidity and defense.
It does. Something like 40% fortress. This is maximum protection to ensure your lifestyle is protected during a crash or a long recession. Keep that 10% insurance because inflation is the single greatest risk to a fixed retirement income. And then 50% engine. You're still participating in growth, but you've minimized your aggressive equity risk.
The beauty of this framework is that no matter what happens,
no matter which monster arrives, the deflationary winter, the inflationary fire, or the rapid growth summer, you are protected. You will never be the investor who is forced to sell their life savings at the wrong time. Your portfolio is built to navigate the structural certainty of the debt reset.
So we've laid out the historical blueprint 5 times before, and now for the 6th time, this massive debt, $300 trillion, must be eliminated.
And the wealth transfer from savers and creditors to debtors and hard asset owners is a mathematical certainty, not a mere probability.
We've shown you the 6 stages, from that illusory prosperity all the way to the inevitable political breakdown, and the 3 crisis-proof positions that have successfully survived everything since 1929. The signal is loud and it's clear.
The ultimate takeaway here is empowerment. You now possess the knowledge of the pattern and the protective strategy.
So let's leave our listeners with a final thought to consider.
The next crisis is not a random market event. It is a mathematical certainty that is programmed into the very structure of our debt-based economy. The question you must answer is not what the market will do next week, but rather which investor you will be in the eye of the storm. Will you be the one forced to sell your life savings at the bottom because you lack that cash reserve? Or will you be the one who is strategically positioned, holding the fortress, the insurance, and the engine, ready to deploy your optionality, buy the deals, and lead the recovery when the next great cycle of expansion begins?